What if failure wasn't the end, but the beginning of something far greater? Marcus Aurelius once wrote, "The impediment to action advances action. What stands in the way becomes the way." These words, spoken by one of history's greatest Stoic thinkers, challenge us to see failure not as a setback, but as a stepping stone. For the Stoics, failure wasn't something to fear or avoid. It was an opportunity to grow, to learn, and to become stronger. In this video, we'll explore how Stoicism teaches us to reframe failure, not as a defeat, but as a powerful tool for self-improvement and resilience. We'll dive into key principles like detachment, acceptance, and the dichotomy of control, and uncover how embracing these ideas can transform the way we face challenges in our own lives. By the end, you'll see why the Stoics believed that failure isn't just inevitable, it's essential. So, let's begin this journey together and discover how failure can become your greatest teacher. Stoics teach us that not everything is within our control. In fact, one of the foundational principles of Stoicism is the dichotomy of control, the idea that some things are up to us while others are not. Epictetus, one of the most influential Stoic philosophers, put it simply, "Some things are within our power while others are not." What he meant was that we have control over our thoughts, our actions, and how we choose to respond to the world around us. But external events like the weather, other people's opinions, or even the outcome of our efforts are beyond our control. And here's the key: trying to control what we can't only leads to frustration and disappointment. Instead, Stoicism encourages us to focus our energy on what we can influence, our own mindset and behavior. Let's take a modern example: losing a job. It's a situation many of us can relate to, and it often feels like a personal failure. But according to Stoic philosophy, the outcome, whether you keep the job or not, isn't entirely within your control. What is within your control is how you prepare, how you perform, and how you handle the situation if it doesn't go your way. Maybe you gave it your best effort, but the company had to downsize. Maybe you worked tirelessly, but the decision was out of your hands. The Stoic approach isn't to dwell on the outcome, but to focus on the effort you put in and how you choose to move forward. By shifting your perspective, you can see failure not as a reflection of your worth, but as an opportunity to reassess, adapt, and grow. So here's a question to reflect on. What failures have you experienced that were outside your control, and how did you respond? Did you let them define you, or did you use them as a chance to learn and improve? The Stoics believed that by understanding the dichotomy of control, we can free ourselves from the weight of external outcomes and focus on what truly matters, our own growth and resilience. Imagine being exiled to a remote island, stripped of your status, your wealth, and everything you once held dear. This is exactly what happened to Seneca, one of the most prominent Stoic philosophers. Yet, instead of crumbling under the weight of his circumstances, Seneca saw his exile as an opportunity. He wrote, "Difficulties strengthen the mind as labor does the body." For Seneca, failure wasn't a punishment, it was a teacher. His time in exile became a period of deep reflection and growth, where he honed his philosophy and wrote some of his most profound works. This is the Stoic mindset in action, viewing failure not as a dead end but as a classroom. The Stoics believed that every failure carries a lesson if only we're willing to look for it. Think of it like this: when you stumble, you're forced to pause and examine what went wrong. Maybe you discover a blind spot in your skills, or perhaps you realize you've been pursuing the wrong goal altogether. Failure has a way of stripping away illusions, revealing both our weaknesses and our strengths. It's like holding up a mirror to ourselves, showing us where we need to improve and where we're already capable. Take, for example, a failed business venture. On the surface, it might feel like a crushing defeat, but dig a little deeper and you might find valuable insights. Maybe the failure exposed gaps in your planning or highlighted areas where you need to develop new skills. Perhaps it revealed that your passion lies elsewhere, steering you toward a path that's more aligned with your true purpose. The Stoics would argue that these lessons are far more valuable than the success you initially sought. After all, success can sometimes blind us to our flaws, while failure forces us to confront them head-on. So, here's a question to consider. What lessons have your failures taught you about yourself? Have they shown you where you need to grow, or perhaps revealed strength you didn't know you had? The Stoics remind us that failure isn't just inevitable, it's necessary. It's through these moments of struggle that we gain clarity, build resilience, and ultimately become better versions of ourselves. And that's a lesson worth embracing. Why do Stoics emphasize detachment from outcomes? At first glance, it might seem counterintuitive after all. Isn't it natural to care deeply about the results of our efforts? But Stoicism offers a different perspective. Detachment doesn't mean indifference or apathy. Instead, it's about freeing ourselves from the emotional roller coaster that comes with tying our self-worth to external results. Marcus Aurelius put it this way: "You have power over your mind, not outside events. Realize this and you will find strength." In other words, when we detach from outcomes, we gain the ability to see failure not as a personal indictment, but as a neutral event, one that can teach us something valuable if we're willing to look. Let's take a real-world example, a failed relationship. It's something many of us have experienced, and it can feel like a deep, personal failure. But what if, instead of seeing it as a reflection of your worth, you viewed it as an opportunity to learn? Maybe the relationship taught you something about your boundaries, your communication style, or what you truly value in a partner. By detaching from the outcome, whether the relationship succeeded or failed, you can focus on the lessons it offered. This shift in perspective doesn't erase the pain, but it does help you build emotional resilience. You're no longer defined by the failure. Instead, you're empowered by the growth it sparked. So, how might detaching from outcomes change your relationship with failure? Imagine approaching a challenge, whether it's a project at work, a creative endeavor, or even a personal goal, with the mindset that the outcome is secondary to the effort you put in. You'd still care about doing your best, but you wouldn't let the result dictate your sense of self-worth. This kind of detachment allows you to take risks, learn from mistakes, and move forward without being weighed down by fear of failure. It's not about giving up on success, it's about redefining what success means to you. The Stoics believed that by practicing detachment, we can cultivate a sense of inner peace and stability, no matter what happens in the external world. It's a powerful tool for navigating life's ups and downs, and it starts with recognizing that failure isn't the enemy, it's just another part of the journey. So, the next time you face a setback, ask yourself, what can I learn from this? How can I grow? And most importantly, how can I detach from the outcome and focus on what truly matters, my own progress and resilience? Stoics don't seek perfection, they seek progress. This might sound surprising in a world that often glorifies flawless achievements, but the Stoic philosophy teaches us that perfection is an illusion. Life is messy, unpredictable, and full of imperfections, and that's exactly how it's meant to be. Epictetus, the Stoic philosopher who endured slavery and exile, once said, "It's not what happens to you, but how you react to it that matters." This simple yet profound idea reminds us that life's imperfections aren't obstacles, they're opportunities to practice resilience, adaptability, and self-compassion. Think about learning a new skill like playing an instrument or mastering a sport. At first, it's frustrating. Your fingers fumble, your timing is off, and it feels like you'll never get it right. But here's the thing, every mistake, every failure is a step forward. Each time you stumble, you're learning something new about the skill, about yourself, and about the process of growth. The Stoics would argue that this struggle isn't just normal, it's necessary. Without failure, there's no progress. Without imperfection, there's no room to improve. Consider the story of Thomas Edison, who famously failed thousands of times before inventing the light bulb. When asked about his repeated failures, he said, "I have not failed. I've just found 10,000 ways that won't work." This mindset, seeing failure as a necessary part of the journey, is deeply Stoic. It's not about avoiding mistakes, it's about embracing them as part of the process. Every misstep brings you closer to mastery as long as you're willing to keep going. So, where in your life are you striving for perfection? Maybe it's at work, where you feel pressure to deliver flawless results every time. Or perhaps it's in your relationships, where you expect yourself to always say and do the right thing. The Stoics would encourage you to let go of that impossible standard. Instead of chasing perfection, focus on progress. Celebrate the small wins, learn from the setbacks, and remember that growth happens not in spite of failure, but because of it. How might embracing imperfection and the failures that come with it help you move closer to the person you want to become? How can changing the way you see failure transform it from a stumbling block into a stepping stone? The Stoics had a unique way of looking at the world, one that focused not on what was lost, but on what could be gained. Seneca, the great Stoic philosopher, once wrote, "Difficulties strengthen the mind as labor does the body." This idea is at the heart of the Stoic approach to failure. It's not about what happens to you, but how you choose to interpret it. By shifting your perspective, you can turn even the most challenging setbacks into opportunities for growth. Let's take a simple example: failing an exam. On the surface, it feels like a defeat. You might feel disappointed, frustrated, or even embarrassed. But what if, instead of dwelling on the result, you focused on what the experience taught you? Maybe it revealed gaps in your understanding or showed you where your study habits could improve. Perhaps it pushed you to seek out new resources, ask for help, or develop better time management skills. In this light, the failure isn't the end of the road. It's the beginning of a stronger, more resilient version of yourself. That's the power of perspective. It allows you to see failure not as a loss, but as a lesson. The Stoics believed that adversity has a way of revealing our true potential. When things go wrong, we're forced to dig deeper to find strength we didn't know we had. Think of it like lifting weights. The resistance is what makes you stronger. Without it, you'd never grow. Failure works the same way. It challenges us, pushes us out of our comfort zones, and forces us to adapt. And in that process, we often discover new skills, new insights, and new paths forward that we might never have considered otherwise. So, here's a question to reflect on. How could you reframe a recent failure to see it as an opportunity? Maybe it's a project that didn't go as planned, a goal you didn't achieve, or a relationship that didn't work out. What did you learn from it? How did it change you? The Stoics remind us that failure isn't just something to endure, it's something to embrace. By changing your perspective, you can transform even the toughest moments into stepping stones toward a stronger, wiser, and more resilient version of yourself. And that's a perspective worth cultivating. Resilience isn't built in success, it's forged in failure. The Stoics understood this better than most. They saw failure not as a sign of weakness, but as a test of character, a chance to prove our strength and adaptability. Marcus Aurelius, the philosopher king, once wrote, "The obstacle in the path becomes the path. Never forget, within every obstacle is an opportunity to improve our condition." For the Stoics, failure wasn't something to avoid. It was something to embrace, because it was through these challenges that resilience was born. Take the story of Cato the Younger, a Stoic who lived during the tumultuous final years of the Roman Republic. Cato was a man of unwavering principles, but his political career was marked by repeated defeats. He fought tirelessly against corruption and tyranny, yet time and again his efforts were thwarted. But here's the thing, Cotto never gave up. Even in the face of crushing political losses, he remained steadfast in his values. His resilience wasn't about winning, it was about staying true to himself, no matter the cost. When his cause seemed hopeless, he didn't crumble, he stood taller. His failures didn't break him, they made him stronger. And in doing so, he became a symbol of Stoic resilience, inspiring generations to come. This idea of resilience through failure isn't just ancient wisdom, it's as relevant today as it was in Cotto's time. Think about the last time you faced a major setback. Maybe it was a rejection, a missed opportunity, or a goal that seemed just out of reach. In that moment, it probably felt like the end of the world. But looking back, can you see how it shaped you? How it forced you to dig deeper, to find strength you didn't know you had. That's resilience in action. It's not about avoiding failure, it's about learning to rise after you fall. So here's a question to reflect on. What failures have made you stronger and how? Maybe it was a job you didn't get, but it pushed you to explore a new career path. Or perhaps it was a relationship that ended, but it taught you more about yourself and what you truly value. The Stoics would say that these moments of struggle are where resilience is built. They're the fire that tempers the steel, the challenges that reveal our true strength. And when we embrace them, we don't just survive failure, we grow through it. That's the Stoic way, to see every setback as an opportunity to become more resilient, more grounded, and more capable of facing whatever comes next. What if failure isn't real? What if it's just a story we tell ourselves, a judgment we place on events rather than an objective truth? This is the Stoic perspective. Failure isn't something that happens to us, it's something we create in our mind. Epictetus, the Stoic philosopher who endured slavery and exile, put it this way: it's not what happens to you, but how you interpret it that matters. In other words, failure isn't an event, it's a perception. And when we change how we see it, we change how it affects us. Let's take a modern example, a rejected job application. On the surface, it feels like a failure. You put in the time, crafted the perfect resume, and maybe even aced the interview only to hear the words, "We've decided to go with another candidate." It's easy to see this as a personal defeat, a sign that you're not good enough. But what if, instead of labeling it as failure, you saw it as feedback? Maybe the role wasn't the right fit, or perhaps the company was looking for something specific that you didn't have yet. The Stoics would argue that the rejection itself isn't the problem, it's the meaning you attach to it. By shifting your perspective, you can see it not as a dead end, but as a redirection, a nudge toward something better suited to your skills and goals. This idea isn't just philosophical, it's practical. Think about how often we label experiences as failures without considering the bigger picture. A relationship ends and we call it a failure, even if it taught us valuable lessons about love and boundaries. A project falls short of expectations and we see it as a failure, even if it pushed us to innovate and grow. The Stoics remind us that these labels are ours to define. What if, instead of seeing failure as a fixed outcome, we saw it as a moment of learning, a stepping stone on the path to something greater? So here's a question to reflect on. How might your perception of failure be limiting your growth? Are you quick to label setbacks as failures, or do you see them as opportunities to learn and adapt? The Stoics believed that by reframing our perspective, we can free ourselves from the weight of failure and embrace the lessons it offers. After all, failure isn't something that happens to us, it's something we choose to see. And when we choose to see it differently, we open the door to growth, resilience, and a deeper understanding of ourselves. How might your life change if you stopped seeing failure as an end and started seeing it as a beginning? Stoics remind us to focus on the present, not the past. It's easy to get caught up in what went wrong, replaying mistakes in our minds like a broken record. But dwelling on failure doesn't change what happened. It only pulls us away from the opportunities right in front of us. Marcus Aurelius put it simply, do not disturb yourself by picturing your life as a whole. Do not let your thoughts run on what may or may not be. Instead, focus on the present moment. This isn't about ignoring the past or pretending failure didn't happen. It's about recognizing that the present is where we have the power to act, to learn, and to grow. Think about a time when you missed out on something you really wanted, a job, a relationship, or even a personal goal. At the time, it might have felt like the end of the world, but what if that missed opportunity opened the door to something even better? Maybe the job you didn't get led you to a role that was a better fit for your skills and passions. Or perhaps the relationship that didn't work out gave you the clarity to recognize what you truly value in a partner. The Stoics would argue that by staying present, we can see these moments not as failures but as redirections, opportunities to align more closely with our true path. Here's a modern example. Imagine you're working on a project that doesn't go as planned. You pour your heart into it, but the results fall short. It's tempting to dwell on what went wrong, to obsess over every misstep. But what if, instead of fixating on the past, you turned your attention to the present? What can you do right now to improve? What lessons can you apply to your next project? By focusing on the present, you shift from regret to action, from stagnation to progress. That's the Stoic approach, using the present moment as a springboard for growth rather than a prison of past mistakes. So, how can focusing on the present help you move past failure? When you're stuck replaying what went wrong, it's like trying to drive forward while staring in the rearview mirror. You're bound to miss what's ahead, but when you bring your attention to the here and now, you open yourself to new possibilities. You give yourself the space to learn, to adapt, and to move forward with clarity and purpose. The Stoics believed that the present moment is where life happens, not in the regrets of the past or the uncertainties of the future. By embracing it, you can transform failure from a weight that holds you back into a stepping stone that propels you forward. How might staying present change the way you approach your next challenge? What if you could prepare for failure before it even happens? The Stoics had a powerful tool for this very purpose, a practice called premeditatio malorum, or the premeditation of evils. Seneca, one of the great Stoic philosophers, described it this way: what is quite unlooked for is more crushing in its effect, and unexpectedness adds to the weight of a disaster. This is a reason for ensuring that nothing ever takes us by surprise. In other words, by imagining potential setbacks in advance, we can reduce their emotional impact and face them with greater clarity and courage when they arise. This isn't about pessimism or dwelling on the worst-case scenario. It's about building mental resilience by preparing for life's uncertainties. Let's take a practical example. Imagine you're about to have a difficult conversation with a colleague or loved one. Maybe you're nervous about how it will go, worried that it might lead to conflict or misunderstanding. The Stoic approach would be to sit down beforehand and mentally walk through the possible outcomes. What if the conversation doesn't go as planned? What if emotions run high? By visualizing these scenarios, you're not just bracing yourself for failure, you're also giving yourself the chance to plan your response. You might think about how to stay calm, how to listen actively, or how to express yourself clearly even in the heat of the moment. This kind of preparation doesn't eliminate the risk of failure, but it does make it feel less daunting. You're no longer walking into the unknown, you're stepping into a situation you've already thought through. The beauty of premeditatio malorum is that it doesn't just apply to big, life-altering events. It works just as well for everyday challenges. Think about a presentation at work, a job interview, or even a tough workout. by anticipating what could go wrong. Technical difficulties, tough questions, or physical fatigue, you're better equipped to handle those moments if they arise. And here's the key: when you've already imagined the worst, you're less likely to be caught off guard. Fear of failure loses its grip because you've already faced it in your mind. So, how might anticipating failure help you face it with courage? The Stoics believed that by preparing for adversity, we strip it of its power to shock or overwhelm us. It's like rehearsing for a play. You practice the lines, the movements, and even the mistakes, so that when the curtain rises, you're ready for anything. This practice doesn't just make failure easier to handle, it also gives you the confidence to take risks and embrace challenges, knowing that you've already thought through the possibilities. And that's the real gift of premeditatio malorum. It turns fear into foresight and uncertainty into opportunity. How might this Stoic practice change the way you approach your next challenge? For Stoics, failure isn't just a challenge, it's a test of our virtues. It's in those moments of struggle that our commitment to wisdom, courage, justice, and temperance is truly revealed. Epictetus, the Stoic philosopher who faced immense hardship in his own life, once said, "Virtue is the highest good, and it is the only thing that is truly within our power." What he meant was that no matter what happens to us externally, our ability to act with virtue, to make wise, courageous, and just choices, is always within our control. And failure, in this sense, becomes a mirror, reflecting not just our weaknesses, but our strengths and values as well. Consider a situation where standing up for a principle leads to failure. Imagine you're at work and you witness something unethical happening. You know speaking up could cost you your job, but staying silent would compromise your integrity. The Stoic approach isn't to avoid the risk of failure, it's to act with courage and justice regardless of the outcome. Even if your actions lead to a setback, like losing your position, the Stoics would argue that you've succeeded in a far more important way by staying true to your virtues. In this light, failure isn't a defeat, it's a testament to your character. It shows that you value justice over comfort and courage over conformity. This idea isn't just theoretical, it's deeply practical. Think about the last time you faced a moral dilemma. Maybe it was a small moment, like choosing honesty over convenience, or a larger one, like standing up for someone who couldn't stand up for themselves. In those moments, failure wasn't about the outcome, it was about the choice you made. Did you act with wisdom, courage, and justice even when it was hard? The Stoics believed that these choices, more than any external success, define who we are. Failure, then, becomes a kind of litmus test for our virtues, showing us where we stand and where we can grow. So, here's a question to reflect on. How have your failures tested your virtues, and what did you learn? Maybe a setback revealed your capacity for resilience, or perhaps a difficult decision showed you the importance of temperance and self-control. The Stoics remind us that failure isn't just something to endure, it's something to embrace, because it's through these challenges that we strengthen our virtues and deepen our understanding of what it means to live a good life. And in the end, isn't that what truly matters? What does it mean to truly accept failure? For the Stoics, acceptance isn't about giving up or resigning yourself to defeat. It's about acknowledging reality as it is, without resistance or denial. Marcus Aurelius, the philosopher king, put it this way: accept the things to which fate binds you, and love the people with whom fate brings you together, but do so with all your heart. In other words, acceptance is about embracing what happens, not because you like it, but because fighting against it only creates more suffering. It's a way of freeing yourself from the emotional weight of failure so you can move forward with clarity and purpose. Let's take a relatable example. Imagine you've been planning a big event for months, a wedding, a conference, or even a family gathering. You've poured your time, energy, and resources into making it perfect. But then, something unexpected happens. A storm rolls in, a key speaker cancels, or a global pandemic forces everything to shut down. The event is cancelled and all your hard work seems wasted. It's easy to feel frustrated, angry, or even heartbroken, but here's where Stoic acceptance comes in. Instead of resisting the situation or dwelling on what could have been, you acknowledge the reality. The event isn't happening. And once you accept that, you can start to focus on what you can do. Maybe you reschedule, or perhaps you find a creative way to adapt. Acceptance doesn't erase the disappointment, but it does give you the space to move forward without being stuck in regret. This idea of acceptance isn't just about big events, it applies to everyday failures too. Think about a time when you made a mistake at work or missed an important deadline. Instead of beating yourself up or trying to shift the blame, what if you simply acknowledged what happened? By accepting the mistake, you free yourself from the emotional spiral of guilt and shame. You can then focus on what really matters, learning from the experience and figuring out how to do better next time. Acceptance isn't passive, it's a powerful tool for growth. So, how can accepting failure help you find clarity and purpose? When you stop resisting what's happened and start embracing it, you create space for reflection and action. You're no longer stuck in the past, replaying what went wrong. Instead, you're looking ahead, asking yourself, what can I learn from this? How can I grow? The Stoics believed that acceptance is the first step toward resilience. It's not about pretending failure doesn't hurt. It's about recognizing that the pain is temporary, and that on the other side of it lies the opportunity to become stronger, wiser, and more aligned with your true path. How might acceptance change the way you face your next setback? Stoics remind us to see failure in the context of a larger journey, a single chapter in the story of our lives, not the entire book. Seneca, one of the most eloquent voices of Stoicism, wrote, "Life is like a play. It's not the length, but the quality of the acting that matters." What he meant was that our lives aren't defined by isolated moments of success or failure, but by the overall arc of how we live, grow, and respond to the challenges we face. When we zoom out and look at the bigger picture, individual setbacks start to feel less like catastrophes and more like stepping stones on a much longer path. Think about a career setback, for example. Maybe you were passed over for a promotion, or perhaps a project you poured your heart into didn't succeed. In the moment, it feels like a crushing blow. But what if years later, that very failure led you to a more fulfilling role, a new passion, or even a completely different career path? The Stoics would argue that what seems like a failure today might be the catalyst for something far greater tomorrow. It's not about dismissing the pain or frustration. It's about recognizing that life is a series of interconnected events, and sometimes what feels like a dead end is actually a detour to something better. Consider the story of J.K. Rowling, who faced countless rejections before Harry Potter was finally published. At the time, each rejection felt like a failure, a sign that a dream might never come true. But looking back, those setbacks were part of a larger journey, one that ultimately led to her becoming one of the most successful authors in history. The Stoics would say that her story isn't unique. It's a reminder that failure is often a necessary part of the process, a way of redirecting us toward our true purpose. So, how does viewing failure as part of a larger journey change your perspective? When you're in the middle of a setback, it's easy to feel like it's the end of the road. But what if, instead of seeing it as a final destination, you saw it as a single moment in a much longer story? How might that shift in perspective help you approach challenges with more patience, resilience, and hope? The Stoics believed that life is a mosaic made up of countless moments, some bright, some dark, and that it's only when we step back that we can see the full picture. By embracing this long view, we can find meaning in our struggles and trust that even our failures are part of something greater. How might your story look when you see it from this perspective? Why do Stoics value internal success over external achievements? At first glance, it might seem counterintuitive after all. Isn't success often measured by what we achieve in the world? But Stoicism offers a different perspective. For the Stoics, true success isn't about wealth, status, or accolades. It's about the quality of your character and the strength of your virtues. Epictetus, the Stoic philosopher who endured slavery and exile, put it this way: "It's not what happens to you, but how you respond to it that matters." In other words, external events, whether you win or lose, succeed or fail, are ultimately beyond your control. What is within your control is how you choose to act, how you treat others, and how you grow through every experience. Let's take a real-world example. Imagine you've spent months working on a project, pouring your energy and creativity into it, only to have it fall short of expectations. Maybe it didn't get the recognition you hoped for, or perhaps it was outright rejected. On the surface, it feels like a failure, but here's the Stoic perspective. The true measure of success isn't the outcome, it's what you gained internally. Did you act with integrity throughout the process? Did you stay true to your values even when it was hard? Did you learn something about yourself or your craft? These are the questions that matter because they reflect your character, not your circumstances. In this light, the project wasn't a failure at all. It was an opportunity to strengthen your inner self, to build resilience, and to deepen your understanding of what truly matters. Consider the story of a business leader who faced a major setback. Their company, once thriving, was hit hard by an economic downturn. They could have cut corners, compromised their values, or blamed others for the situation. Instead, they chose to act with honesty and compassion, even when it meant making difficult decisions. In the end, the company didn't recover, but the leader emerged with their integrity intact and with a newfound sense of purpose. The Stoics would argue that this is the essence of success, not what you achieve externally, but who you become internally. So, how can you shift your focus from external success to internal growth? Start by asking yourself, what values do I want to live by, regardless of the outcome? How can I measure success not by what I accomplish, but by how I act and grow along the way? The Stoics believed that by prioritizing character over achievements, we free ourselves from the roller coaster of external validation. We stop chasing fleeting rewards and start building something far more enduring, a life rooted in wisdom, courage, and integrity. And isn't that the kind of success that truly lasts? Stoics believe failure can set us free. It's a bold idea, especially in a world that often equates success with approval and perfection. But here's the thing, when we fail, we're forced to confront the very things we've been trying to avoid: judgment, imperfection, and vulnerability. And in that confrontation, something remarkable happens. Seneca, the Stoic philosopher, once wrote, "Difficulties strengthen the mind as labor does the body." What he meant was that adversity, including failure, has the power to strip away the illusions we cling to, revealing a deeper sense of freedom. It's not that failure feels good in the moment, it rarely does. But it can liberate us from the weight of other people's expectations and our own relentless pursuit of perfection. Take the example of a public failure, something many of us dread. Imagine giving a presentation that doesn't go as planned. Maybe you stumble over your words, or the audience doesn't respond the way you hoped. In the moment, it feels like a disaster. But what happens afterward? Often we realize that the world didn't end. People didn't stop respecting us, and more importantly, we discover that we're still standing. This kind of failure can be incredibly freeing. It shows us that we don't need to be perfect to be valued, and that our worth isn't tied to external validation. In fact, it's often through these moments of vulnerability that we connect more deeply with others, showing them and ourselves that it's okay to be human. This idea isn't just theoretical, it's deeply practical. Think about the last time you failed in a way that felt public or embarrassing. Did it change how you see yourself? Did it free you from the pressure to always get it right? The Stoics would argue that failure, far from being something to fear, is a gateway to authenticity. It forces us to let go of the masks we wear and the standards we impose on ourselves, allowing us to live more honestly and courageously. So, here's a question to reflect on. How has failure freed you from fear or societal expectations? Maybe it was a moment when you stopped worrying about what others thought and started living for yourself. Or perhaps it was a failure that showed you that perfection isn't the goal, growth is. The Stoics remind us that failure isn't just something to endure, it's something to embrace, because it's through these moments that we find the freedom to be truly ourselves. And isn't that the kind of freedom worth striving for? What does it mean to truly let go of failure? For the Stoics, letting go isn't about forgetting or pretending the past didn't happen. It's about releasing the emotional weight that keeps us stuck. Marcus Aurelius, the philosopher king, once wrote, "You have power over your mind, not outside events. Realize this, and you will find strength." This simple yet profound idea reminds us that while we can't change what's already happened, we can choose how much power it holds over us. Letting go, then, becomes an act of reclaiming that power, freeing ourselves from the grip of regret and opening the door to what's possible in the present. Think about a missed opportunity, something many of us can relate to. Maybe it was a job you didn't get, a relationship that didn't work out, or a dream you had to put on hold. At the time, it might have felt like the end of the road, but what if, instead of holding onto that disappointment, you let it go? What if you saw it not as a closed door, but as a redirection? The Stoics believed that every failure, every missed opportunity, carries the potential for something new if only we're willing to release our attachment to what could have been. By letting go, we create space for new possibilities to emerge, ones we might never have considered if we'd stayed fixated on the past. Here's a practical example. Imagine you've been passed over for a promotion. It's easy to dwell on the rejection, replaying the interview in your mind or questioning your worth. But what if, instead of holding onto that disappointment, you let it go? What if you used that energy to explore new opportunities, to develop skills you've been meaning to work on, or even to consider a completely different career path? Letting go doesn't mean giving up. It means redirecting your focus toward what you can control rather than clinging to what you can't. It's about trusting that the path ahead, even if it's not the one you originally planned, might lead you somewhere even better. So, here's a question to reflect on. What failures or missed opportunities are you holding onto that might be holding you back? Is there a past mistake or disappointment that's been weighing on you, keeping you from moving forward? The Stoics remind us that letting go isn't about erasing the past, it's about choosing to live fully in the present, where we have the power to act, to grow, and to create something new. By releasing what no longer serves us, we open ourselves to the possibilities that lie ahead, and sometimes that's the most powerful step we can take. Stoics find gratitude even in failure. It might sound counterintuitive. How can we be thankful for something that feels like a loss? But the Stoics believe that every experience, no matter how difficult, carries hidden value. Epictetus, the philosopher who turned hardship into wisdom, once said, "He who has a why to live can bear almost any how." What he meant was that when we look for the lessons and opportunities within our struggles, we can find meaning even in the toughest moments. Gratitude, then, becomes a lens through which we can reframe failure, not as an ending, but as a beginning filled with potential. Consider a failed relationship, for example. On the surface, it might feel like a painful loss, a chapter of your life that didn't go as planned. But what if, instead of focusing on what went wrong, you looked for what you gained? Maybe the experience taught you more about your boundaries, your needs, or what you truly value in a partner. Perhaps it pushed you to grow in ways you wouldn't have otherwise, helping you become more self-aware or resilient. The Stoics would argue that these lessons are gifts, even if they came wrapped in disappointment. By practicing gratitude, you shift your focus from what you've lost to what you've gained, turning failure into a source of strength. This practice isn't just about relationships, it applies to any setback, big or small. Think about a project that didn't go as planned, a goal you didn't achieve, or even a mistake you made at work. Instead of dwelling on the frustration, what if you asked yourself, what did I learn from this? How did it help me grow? Gratitude doesn't erase the pain of failure, but it does help us see the bigger picture. It reminds us that every experience, no matter how challenging, contributes to who we are and who we're becoming. So, here's a question to reflect on. What can you be grateful for in your past failures? Maybe it's a skill you developed, a lesson you learned, or even a new direction you discovered. The Stoics believed that gratitude is a powerful tool for resilience, helping us find meaning in the midst of struggle. By embracing this mindset, we can transform failure from a source of regret into a wellspring of growth. How might gratitude change the way you see your own setbacks? What does it take to face failure with courage? For the Stoics, courage wasn't just about bravery in the face of danger. It was about the strength to confront life's inevitable setbacks with clarity and resolve. Seneca, the Stoic philosopher who faced exile and personal tragedy, once wrote, "Sometimes even to live is an act of courage." This idea might seem dramatic, but it speaks to a deeper truth. Courage isn't just about grand gestures. It's about the quiet, everyday resilience required to keep moving forward, even when things don't go as planned. For the Stoics, courage was essential not because it made failure easier, but because it allowed them to see failure as an opportunity rather than an obstacle. Think about starting over after a major setback, a career change, a financial loss, or even a personal crisis. It's not just about picking up the pieces, it's about finding the strength to rebuild, often from scratch. Take the example of someone who loses their job unexpectedly. The initial shock might feel overwhelming, but courage is what pushes them to update their resume, network with others, and explore new opportunities, even when the future feels uncertain. The Stoics would argue that this kind of courage isn't about ignoring fear or pretending everything is fine. It's about acknowledging the fear and choosing to act anyway, trusting that the effort itself is worth something, regardless of the outcome. So, how can you cultivate this kind of courage in your own life? Start by reframing what courage means to you. It's not about being fearless, it's about being willing to take the next step, even when you're unsure of where it will lead. It's about showing up day after day, even when the path ahead feels daunting. The Stoics believed that courage grows through practice. By facing small challenges head-on, we build the resilience to tackle bigger ones. Maybe it's speaking up in a meeting, even when you're nervous, or trying something new, even if you might fail. Each act of courage, no matter how small, strengthens your ability to face failure with grace and determination. Here's a question to reflect on. What's one area of your life where you could use more courage? Is there a challenge you've been avoiding, or a failure you've been reluctant to confront? The Stoics remind us that courage isn't something we're born with, it's something we develop through action. By embracing failure as a teacher and stepping forward despite the fear, we not only grow stronger but also discover a deeper sense of purpose. And in the end, isn't that what courage is all about? Stoics see failure as a humbling experience, one that strips away our illusions of control and reminds us of our shared humanity. Marcus Aurelius, the philosopher king, once wrote, "Pride is a master of deception. When you think you're occupied in the weightiest business, that's when he has you in his spell." What he meant was that pride often blinds us to our limitations, making us believe we're invincible or infallible. But failure has a way of cutting through that pride, bringing us back to earth and showing us where we truly stand. It's not about diminishing ourselves, it's about recognizing that we're all works in progress, constantly learning and evolving. Take the example of a public mistake, something many of us dread. Imagine giving a presentation at work, only to realize halfway through that you've misread the data or misunderstood the assignment. In the moment, it feels like a blow to your confidence. But here's where humility comes in. Instead of doubling down on the mistake or trying to shift the blame, you acknowledge it openly. You say, "I made a mistake and I'm sorry. Let's figure out how to fix it." This act of humility doesn't just repair the situation, it also deepens your self-awareness. It shows you where you need to improve, and it builds trust with those around you. Failure, in this sense, becomes a teacher, one that reminds us to stay grounded and open to growth. Humility also helps us see failure as a shared experience, not something unique to us. Think about it, everyone fails at some point. The most successful people you admire, artists, entrepreneurs, leaders, have all faced setbacks. What sets them apart isn't their ability to avoid failure, but their willingness to learn from it with humility. They don't let pride get in the way of progress. Instead, they use failure as a mirror, reflecting not just their weaknesses, but their potential for growth. So, here's a question to reflect on. How has failure taught you humility, and how has it shaped you? Maybe it was a moment when you realized you didn't have all the answers, or perhaps it was a setback that forced you to ask for help. The Stoics believed that humility is the foundation of wisdom because it keeps us open to learning even when the lessons are hard. By embracing failure as a humbling experience, we not only grow stronger but also more connected to the people around us. And in the end, isn't that what true growth is all about? How do Stoics overcome the fear of failure? It's a question many of us grapple with, especially when the stakes feel high. The Stoic answer lies in their timeless principle: focus on what you can control and accept what you cannot. Epictetus, the Stoic philosopher who endured slavery and exile, put it this way: it's not things themselves that disturb people, but their judgments about things. In other words, fear of failure isn't about the failure itself, it's about how we perceive it. By shifting our focus to what's within our control, our effort, our preparation, and our mindset, we can face fear with reason rather than resistance. Let's take a practical example: preparing for a challenging task like a big presentation or a difficult conversation. The fear of failure might creep in, whispering doubts like, "What if I mess up?" Or, "What if they don't like what I have to say?" The Stoic approach isn't to ignore these fears, but to confront them head-on. Start by asking yourself, what's within my control? You can't control how others will react, but you can control how well you prepare, how clearly you communicate, and how calmly you respond to unexpected challenges. By focusing on these elements, you shift your energy from worrying about the outcome to taking meaningful action. Fear doesn't disappear, but it loses its power to paralyze you. Here's where reason comes in. Epictetus taught that fear is often rooted in irrational judgments, assumptions about what might happen that aren't grounded in reality. For example, you might fear that failing at a task will make others think less of you. But is that really true, or is it just a story you're telling yourself? By examining these fears with reason, you can separate fact from fiction and approach the situation with clarity. Fear becomes less about the unknown and more about what you can do to prepare for it. So, what fears of failure hold you back, and how can you address them? Maybe it's the fear of rejection, the fear of making a mistake, or even the fear of not being good enough. The Stoics would encourage you to break these fears down. What's within your control and what isn't? How can you focus on the process rather than the outcome? By practicing this mindset, you can transform fear from a roadblock into a motivator, a reminder to prepare, to act with intention, and to grow through the experience. After all, fear isn't the enemy, it's an invitation to step forward with courage and reason. How might this Stoic approach change the way you face your next challenge? Stoics see failure as a force for transformation, a moment that doesn't just knock us down, but propels us forward in ways we might never have imagined. Seneca, one of the great Stoic thinkers, once wrote, "Difficulties strengthen the mind as labor does the body." What he meant was that adversity, including failure, has the power to reshape us, to strip away what no longer serves us, and to reveal new paths we might not have considered otherwise. It's not that failure feels good in the moment, it rarely does, but it has a way of shaking us out of complacency, forcing us to reevaluate our goals, our priorities, and even our sense of purpose. Take the example of a career setback. Imagine working tirelessly for years in a job that no longer fulfills you, only to be let go unexpectedly. At first, it feels like a devastating blow of failure that leaves you questioning your worth and your direction. But what if, instead of seeing it as an ending, you saw it as a turning point? What if it was the push you needed to finally pursue that passion you've been putting off, or to explore a career that aligns more closely with your values? This is the Stoic perspective. Failure isn't just a stumbling block, it's a catalyst for change. It forces us to ask hard questions, to confront what truly matters, and to take bold steps toward a more authentic life. Consider the story of someone who loses their job in a corporate setting, only to discover a passion for teaching or starting their own business. What initially felt like a failure becomes the spark for a new chapter, one that's more aligned with their strengths and values. The Stoics would argue that this kind of transformation isn't just possible, it's inevitable if we're willing to see failure as an opportunity rather than an obstacle. It's not about pretending the setback didn't hurt, but about recognizing that the pain can lead to growth if we let it. So here's a question to reflect on. How has failure acted as a catalyst for change in your life? Has it pushed you to reevaluate your goals, to take risks you might not have considered, or to pursue a path that feels more true to who you are? The Stoics remind us that failure isn't just something to endure, it's something to embrace, because it's through these moments of struggle that we find the courage to transform. And sometimes that transformation is exactly what we need to live a life that's not just successful, but deeply meaningful. How might your next failure become the spark for your greatest change? How can reflection turn failure into wisdom? For the Stoics, reflection wasn't just a passive act, it was a deliberate practice, a way to transform setbacks into stepping stones. Marcus Aurelius, the philosopher king, wrote in his personal journal, "You have power over your mind, not outside events. Realize this and you will find strength." This simple yet profound idea reminds us that while we can't control what happens to us, we can control how we respond, and reflection is the tool that helps us do just that. By looking back on our failures with curiosity rather than judgment, we uncover the lessons hidden within them, turning what felt like a loss into a source of growth. Take the practice of journaling, for example. Imagine you've just experienced a setback, a project that didn't go as planned, a goal you didn't achieve, or even a difficult conversation that left you feeling defeated. Instead of brushing it aside or dwelling on the frustration, you sit down with a notebook and ask yourself, what happened, what went well, and what didn't? What can I learn from this? This kind of reflection isn't about beating yourself up, it's about gaining clarity. It's a way to step back, examine the situation objectively, and identify what you can do differently next time. For the Stoics, this process wasn't just helpful, it was essential. It allowed them to see failure not as a dead end, but as a classroom. But reflection doesn't have to be formal or time-consuming. It can be as simple as taking a few moments at the end of the day to think about what went wrong and why. Maybe you realize you were overly ambitious in your goals, or perhaps you discover a pattern in how you respond to stress. The key is to approach reflection with honesty and openness without letting shame or regret cloud your perspective. By doing so, you transform failure from something that holds you back into something that propels you forward. So, here's a question to consider. How can you use reflection to gain wisdom from your failures? What's one setback you've experienced recently, and what might it teach you if you took the time to examine it? The Stoics believed that reflection is the bridge between failure and growth, a way to turn stumbling blocks into stepping stones. By making it a regular practice, you not only learn from your mistakes, but also build the resilience to face whatever comes next. And isn't that the kind of wisdom worth striving for? As we wrap up this exploration of Stoicism and failure, let's revisit the key principles that can transform how we approach life's inevitable setbacks. First, there's detachment, the ability to separate our self-worth from external outcomes. By focusing on what we can control, our effort, our mindset, and our response, we free ourselves from the emotional roller coaster of success and failure. Next, there's resilience, the strength to rise after we fall. The Stoics remind us that failure isn't the opposite of success. It's a necessary part of the journey, one that builds our capacity to endure and adapt. And finally, there's perspective, the power to see failure not as a dead end, but as a classroom. Every setback carries a lesson, if only we're willing to look for it. Seneca, one of Stoicism's most eloquent voices, captured this mindset perfectly when he wrote, "Difficulties strengthen the mind as labor does the body." These words remind us that adversity isn't something to fear or avoid, it's something to embrace. It's through struggle that we grow stronger, wiser, and more aligned with our true purpose. Failure, then, isn't the enemy, it's the teacher. It strips away our illusions, reveals our strengths, and pushes us toward paths we might never have considered otherwise. So, how can you apply these principles in your own life? Start by reflecting on a recent failure or setback. What did it teach you? How did it change you? The Stoics believed that every experience, no matter how difficult, carries value if we're willing to look for it. By practicing detachment, building resilience, and shifting your perspective, you can transform failure from a source of fear into a tool for growth. It's not about avoiding mistakes, it's about learning from them and becoming better because of them. Before we go, I'd love to hear your thoughts. How has failure shaped your journey? What lessons have you learned along the way? Share your experiences in the comments below. I'll be reading and responding. And if you found this video helpful, don't forget to subscribe for more insights on Stoicism and personal growth. Together, let's embrace failure not as an ending, but as the beginning of something greater. Thanks for watching, and remember, the obstacle